After 3 years of studying, my wife finally passed her civil service exam. When I got the news, I rushed home to celebrate with her. Instead, she handed me a divorce agreement. A food delivery driver isn't good enough for me anymore. We're from two different worlds. Seeing the disdain in her eyes, I signed without hesitation. I tossed the custom-made ruby necklace from my pocket into the trash, got into my Maserati downstairs, and drove away without a backward glance. Chapter 1. After 3 years of marriage, my wife, Victoria Vance, had finally passed her exam. As soon as I heard, I immediately asked my team leader for the day off. I felt the bulky box in my pocket, my heart filled with a sweet anticipation that quickened my every move. I thought that now Victoria would finally be accepted by my family, and I could finally tell her who I really was. I was halfway through cooking when my wife came home. I hurried to the door and handed her the roses I had prepared. "Congratulations, sweetheart." Victoria, however, took the flowers with a cool indifference. Thinking she might not be feeling well, I quickly knelt to help her into her slippers. She plopped down on the sofa, tossing the flowers carelessly onto the floor. I remained enthusiastic, placing a plate of sliced fruit in front of her before turning back toward the kitchen. That's when she stopped me. "Sincere Marshall, let's get a divorce." When I didn't speak, she repeated herself. "Sincere Marshall, let's get a divorce. You're a food delivery driver. Do you really think we're a match?" I was stunned. "What's not a match about us?" Victoria laughed as if she'd heard the funniest joke in the world. "A match? You and me? You, a delivery driver, are a match for me? Do you hear how ridiculous you sound? We're from two different worlds now." She impatiently pulled a prepared divorce agreement from her bag. "I don't want to waste my breath explaining things to riff-raff like you. Just sign it." Watching her lips move, I couldn't comprehend how such venomous words could come from her. I fought back the tears welling in my eyes. Picking up the pen, I said with grim determination, "You won't regret this after I sign." She turned away in disgust. "I will never regret it." After signing my name, I went into the bedroom, grabbed the key to my underground garage, and left without another word. Downstairs, I took the ruby necklace from my pocket and threw it into the trash can. I met my wife Victoria in college. I was studying for my graduate school entrance exams, spending every day holed up in the library. Victoria sat diagonally across from me. She was makeup-free, but her beauty was undeniable. Though I stole glances at her every day, I never worked up the courage to speak to her. We finally got to know each other when she borrowed a sheet of scratch paper from me. I hadn't been looking for a relationship, but she was so warm and vibrant, like a little sun encouraging me onward. Under the immense pressure of my studies, I desperately needed an emotional sanctuary. One thing led to another, and we got together. After we started dating, I fell head over heels for her. I would have done anything for her. Even though we both failed our respective exams, I was convinced Victoria was the one for me. My family was very wealthy. My father, Dominic Marshall, ran a flourishing corporation, and my mother, Eleanor Marshall, was a high-ranking government official. But they believed in a tough love approach to raising their son, so during college, I was no different from any other student. Blinded by happiness, I decided I wanted to marry Victoria. Her family was from a rural town in the middle of nowhere, a place so remote you had to take a train, then a bus, then a 3-wheeled taxi to get there. Victoria had fought her way into a big city university on her own merit and had to earn her own living expenses. My family absolutely refused to accept her as a daughter-in-law. My mother pleaded with me, telling me that a marriage between people from such different social classes would never be happy. In response, I threatened to cut ties with my family, declaring that then we would be a perfect match. My family, thoroughly disappointed, finally washed their hands of me. I never told Victoria any of this. I just said I was an orphan. After overcoming every obstacle to get married, our life together was not the sweet dream I had imagined. Victoria continued to study for her exams, but after we were married, she was too ashamed to ask her family for money. Seeing her struggle, I gave up my own academic pursuits and dedicated myself to working and earning money to support her. Because my family had blacklisted me, no company in my field would hire me. I could only find odd jobs at small companies for pitifully low wages. The financial and academic pressure nearly drove Victoria mad. She would smash plates and bowls at home, pointing at my nose and screaming, "Sincere Marshall, you're a useless bum. I must have been blind to marry you." The closer her exams got, the more unhinged she became, and the more frequently she brought up divorce. Seeing the madness contort her beautiful face, I made a decision. The next day, I joined the ranks of delivery drivers, working from dawn till dusk. Although there's no shame in any profession, she never let me appear in front of her friends again. I pretended not to care and worked even harder, taking on more orders. The amount of money I transferred to her grew, and I became even more attentive to her needs. To avoid disrupting her studies, I prepared all 3 meals for the day in advance and stored them in the fridge. I never let her do a single chore. When she said studying was too exhausting and she didn't want to be intimate, I agreed without a second thought and moved to the sofa the very next day. Under this meticulous care, Victoria finally passed the written portion of her exam with the top score. I even humbled myself and called in a favor with a friend to get a custom-tailored suit rushed for her interview. The day the suit was ready, Victoria gave me a rare smile. It was the only time in a year of studying that she initiated a kiss. "Thank you, hubby," she said before turning and carrying the suit into the bedroom to try it on as if it were a precious treasure. Seeing her look just as she had when we first met, I didn't regret my decision. Chapter 2. Sitting in the car, I replayed our memories and couldn't stop the tears from falling. I didn't understand how she could be so heartless. Even more, I didn't understand how I could have been so foolish. After my emotions settled, I drove back home to our house in the Far Hills Estate District. I hesitated for a long time, smoking an entire pack of cigarettes. Finally, I walked to the door. With a click, it opened. Seeing me, the butler exclaimed excitedly, "The young master is back." My mother, Eleanor, was surprised to see me return without Victoria. The last time I'd been home, I had knelt at the gate for a day and a night without a drop of water. All I wanted was a chance for Victoria to be accepted. "Can't you just give her one chance?" Seeing my persistence, my mother's heart had softened. She gave me a custom-made diamond necklace from abroad. "If she really passes the exam this time, bring her home. Your father and I are getting old. We can't control you anymore." It seemed my sincerity back then was worthless. Or rather, sincerity without money is worthless. With Victoria's success, her family was even more ecstatic than she was, throwing a huge party in their village. When we got married, we had just signed the papers at the courthouse. There was no celebration at all. Her family had always looked down on me. First, because I didn't have a formal job, and second, because the engagement gift I offered wasn't as generous as her sister's had been. To marry her, I had broken with my family, and I had to sell a watch a friend had given me just to scrape together that gift. My mother-in-law, Brenda Vance, despised me, her face long and sour every time she saw me. Today, however, she was beaming, her heavily lipsticked mouth stretched in a grin that almost reached the back of her head. She didn't waste a moment trying to set Victoria up. "Auntie Polly, if you know any good men, you should introduce them to our Vicky, you hear?" Auntie Polly looked confused. "Isn't your daughter already married?" "Oh, Auntie Polly, that doesn't count. There was no wedding, so how can you call it a marriage?" Brenda grabbed Auntie Polly's arm, repeating her words loudly as if to ensure everyone heard. "If anyone knows a good man, please introduce him to our Vicky." She then moved to another table to repeat the same spiel. Some of the villagers, disgusted by Brenda's behavior, muttered under their breath, "Spit." You'd think she was just crowned queen. The person next to them quickly hushed them. "Hey, why would you want to get on her bad side?" The very next day, Auntie Polly actually did introduce a man to Victoria. Brenda thanked her profusely, immediately killing a chicken to have Auntie Polly stay for dinner. The more they talked, the happier Brenda became. After hearing about the man's circumstances, she was so excited she opened a bottle of fine wine. They arranged all the details for the two to meet right then and there. Although Victoria had passed her exam, she was only a junior civil servant. It sounded glamorous, but her daily reality was chasing economic targets with various companies. The senior staff at her office would sip tea while piling all the work onto her. To make matters worse, she was beautiful, and her section chief had taken notice. Whenever there was a business dinner, he would inevitably drag her along. Between the late nights, heavy drinking, and binge eating, it wasn't long before Victoria's complexion turned sallow. But she didn't care. To her, hobnobbing with business owners in high-end hotels meant she had finally made it into the upper class. Today, Victoria was not in a good mood. Clutching her stomach, she walked towards the private dining room, silently cursing her boss for being inhuman. The client today was particularly important, so the section chief had refused her request for sick leave. 3 rounds of drinks in, Victoria's head was splitting. The figures in front of her blurred from 1 into 2. She propped herself up against the sink in the restroom, her body refusing to obey her. The next second, she collapsed onto the floor. When Victoria opened her eyes again, she was in a hospital. Then she saw me sitting by her bedside. Seeing she was awake, I was about to leave, but I couldn't help but say, "You should drink less in the future." Victoria shot back, "You grubby courier. Have you ever even tasted wine that good? I told you we're from 2 different worlds. What would you know?" She was in more of a hurry to leave than I was. Ripping the 4 from her arm, she yelled for the nurse. I want to be discharged. Seeing her unhinged state, I didn't want to deal with her anymore. The previous night, my father had arranged a meeting for me with some of the company's senior executives. Stepping out for some air, I found Victoria passed out by the restroom door. She was covered in her own vomit, her face as pale as a ghost's. Remembering our once beautiful past, a pang of pity struck me, and I brought her to the hospital. After a great deal of hassle, I finally got her settled in a room. The doctor came out and sternly scolded me. "Young man, your girlfriend is on her period. How could you let her drink so much?" My mind flashed back to the past. Victoria used to have terrible menstrual cramps. Whenever that time of the month came, I would make all sorts of sweet soups for her. I would massage her pressure points for days in advance and make sure she soaked her feet every night. With such careful attention, her cramps had improved significantly. Seeing me stare blankly, the doctor sighed. "You young people are so irresponsible." Not knowing how to explain, I could only apologize profusely. After being berated by Victoria, my heart was in turmoil again. Leaving the hospital, I saw my car, which she had vomited all over, and my frustration grew. I slammed the car door shut, cursing myself for being so weak-willed. Chapter 3. After disappearing from the business dinner a few days ago, Victoria was in hot water. The section chief didn't care about her excuses. He just told her to make a proper apology tonight. I pulled up to the Haosheng Hotel, one of our company's properties, in my newly acquired Lamborghini. Just as I got out, I saw Victoria. Her face was caked in a thick layer of foundation, a clear sign she hadn't fully recovered. A flicker of concern rose in me, but fearing she would see it, I decided to head straight into the hotel. She, however, rushed forward to block my path. "Why are you like a dog I can't shoo away?" Seeing my intention to enter the hotel, she sneered. "Is the Haosheng Hotel a place a pauper like you can enter? Don't you know your place?" I replied coldly. "A good dog doesn't block the path." She had never heard me speak like that before, and her expression changed instantly. "A suit can't hide the stench of poverty on you." "I can smell it from here," she said, pinching her nose. Seeing us arguing, a young security guard came out from the hotel. He strode forward and separated us. "Sir, ma'am, this is a members-only hotel. Please present your VIP gold card or an invitation to enter." Victoria laughed mockingly. "You pauper, I bet you didn't know. The VIP gold card is only for guests who spend over $10 million a year at Haosheng Group hotels." With that, Victoria produced a golden invitation card. The guard bowed respectfully to her and gestured. "This way, ma'am, please." I pulled out a black card and handed it to the guard. He looked at the card, puzzled, but maintained his professional demeanor. Handing the black card back, he said apologetically, "Sir, this card won't work. I wasn't angry. Get your manager." Before the guard could respond, Victoria chimed in with her taunts. "Do you think just anyone can get in here?" Her mocking words continued, and my heart grew colder with each one. Just then, the manager came running towards us. He was clearly a seasoned operator. He took the card with both hands and examined it carefully. Then, his face crinkling into a smile, he bowed a full 120 degrees to me. "My apologies, sir." The manager then slapped the young guard on the back of the head. "He's new." "Apologize to the gentleman at once." The young guard, seeing the situation, panicked. "I'm sorry, sir." I waved my hand to show it was fine. The manager didn't straighten his back, his tone becoming even more respectful. "Allow me to provide you with our exclusive guide service. This way, please." At that moment, a dozen more guards ran out and formed two neat lines at the entrance. "Welcome, our most distinguished guest," the young men shouted in unison. The attention of the entire lobby turned to us, making me feel a bit awkward. I ignored Victoria, who was frozen in place, and walked briskly through the lobby into the exclusive elevator. The young guard asked the manager, bewildered, "What kind of card is that?" The manager smacked him on the head again. "You idiot, that's the Haoxing Group's Supreme card. That gentleman is the new young master who just returned. It's normal that you don't recognize him. I heard he's back to take over Haoxing's subsidiary, Wansheng Company, and will probably return to headquarters after he's made his mark." Victoria stood at the hotel entrance fuming. Power-tripping lackey, she thought. God knows where he got that card. Composing herself, Victoria also entered the hotel. Her section chief had pulled several strings to get a meeting with Mr. Lawson from Wansheng Company. Having heard beforehand that Mr. Lawson had a weakness for beautiful women, the section chief immediately thought of Victoria. At the door of the private room, Victoria took a deep breath. Adjusting her short skirt, she put on her professional smile and pushed open the door. "So sorry I'm a little late. I'll drink 3 glasses as a penalty." After several rounds of drinks, Victoria had already been to the restroom to throw up 3 times. She had just returned when Mr. Lawson wrapped an arm around her. He brought his pig-like face close to her neck, took a deep sniff, and said lecherously, "Beautiful women are just different. You still smell so good even after coming out of the restroom." Victoria fought back her nausea and tried to break free, but she didn't have the strength. As they struggled, Mr. Lawson's phone rang abruptly. He sobered up instantly, pushed Victoria away, and shouted, "Everyone quiet." The entire room fell silent. "Not busy." "The new one?" "Oh, you flatter me. Just a moment, I'll be there in 5 minutes. It's no trouble at all." After hanging up, Mr. Lawson waved his hand to dismiss the party. "That's all for today at that." The section chief hurried over with his glass. "Mr. Lawson, could you perhaps introduce us to this important person?" Mr. Lawson thought for a moment and pointed to a few people. "You few, I'm going to change. Wait for me at the door." Victoria, who had been pointed out, was overjoyed. She rushed to the restroom to touch up her makeup and doused herself in perfume, terrified of smelling like alcohol. The small group followed Mr. Lawson up to the presidential suite on the top floor. Victoria's heart pounded all the way up. When she entered the room, she didn't even dare to lift her head. Then she heard a familiar voice. Victoria's head snapped up, and losing her balance, she fell to the floor. Chapter 4. In the presidential suite on the top floor of the hotel, I was rapidly flipping through the files stacked in front of me. "Mr. Marshall, these are our current projects," my secretary explained. "And these are the proposed cooperative ventures," she said, pointing to another stack of documents. I had studied financial management in college, so some of the business was familiar to me. My father had thrown me directly into this subsidiary, calling it gaining experience. The appointment had been so sudden that only the top executives at the group level knew about it. Figuring I should at least get to know the people at the subsidiary, I had my secretary arrange meetings with a few project managers. "Contact the person in charge of this sector," I said, handing a file to my secretary. "He's nearby right now." "Would you like to see him tonight?" my secretary asked, proving her efficiency. 10 minutes later, I met the project manager, and I also met the person standing behind him, Victoria, my ex-wife. "Mr. Marshall, it's an honor," Mr. Lawson said, extending his hand. "I'm sorry to take up your evening, but I'd appreciate it if you could brief me on this collaboration." Before he could finish, Victoria looked up in terror and collapsed onto the floor. Seeing her state, Mr. Lawson yanked her up and pushed her toward the door. "What is wrong with you?" Get out, though shocked, Victoria still couldn't process it. How could Sincere Marshall, a grubby courier, suddenly be Mr. Marshall? She stood up and pointed at me, screaming, "You're just a grubby courier. What are you doing pretending to be a boss?" Seeing her sudden outburst, my secretary quickly called security to remove her. After the chaotic scene ended, Mr. Lawson saw that my expression hadn't changed. He acted as if nothing had happened and eagerly began to present the project. But without a second thought, I told him to halt the project. I didn't expect to see Victoria in the company's underground parking lot the next day. She was as imperious as ever, unleashing a torrent of words at me. "I don't know what despicable means you used to connect with Mr. Lawson. You want to get back together, don't you? Forget about it. I'd rather marry a pig or a dog than you. I bet you don't know, but my mom introduced me to a boss from Haoxing. He's a million times better than you." With that, she swung her little purse and walked away. That afternoon, the secretary I had sent to investigate returned with a report. The man was someone I was both surprised and not surprised to hear about, my father's driver, Sammy March. A few years ago, he had been deep into gambling. When he lost, he'd go home and beat his wife until she couldn't take it anymore and ran away. But he was a decent driver, so my father never replaced him. He had been doing well for himself these past few years, always in a suit and tie, and some people would flatter him by calling him Mr. March. I figured I should respect her choices. Who she dated was none of my business. After hearing the report, I called my mother. "I agree to the blind date. You can arrange it." My mother was beyond excited. "Oh, son, that's wonderful. You've finally seen the light." "I'll set it up right away," she said, and promptly hung up. Standing in an amusement park in my custom-tailored suit, I felt completely out of place. After confirming several times that this was indeed the right location, I had no choice but to wait at the entrance. Before I left, my mother had given me 1,000 instructions, and I didn't want to disappoint her. Soon a girl in a white dress appeared. She had bright eyes and a radiant smile, her eyes blinking like stars in the sky. Grinning, she ran towards me like a little rabbit. When she reached me, she took my hand. "Sincere, long time no see, Sincere," I thought to myself. This girl was certainly forward. She pulled me into the amusement park, insisting we ride every single attraction together. I was reluctant at first, but I eventually got into it, having even more fun than she was. But before we could finish, the park was about to close. It was only then that I remembered I hadn't asked for her name. When I asked, she looked disappointed. "Sincere, you really forgot about me." But then, memories began to flood my mind. Grace Grant? You could say she was my first love. We were desk mates in our senior year of high school. We had always promised to go to the new amusement park together as soon as it was built. I had planned to confess my feelings to her there after graduation, but fate had other plans. The amusement park was completed, but she was gone. She didn't take the final exams that year. She went abroad instead. She left me a letter telling me to wait for her to come back. We hadn't contacted each other in all these years, and I had truly forgotten about her and about that letter. "As long as you remember now," she said, pretending to be angry, her puffed-out cheeks making her look even cuter. I reached out and poked her cheek, and she burst out laughing. Looking at her familiar yet strange face, I was transported back to that innocent time in high school. The old spark, long dormant in my heart, began to pound once more. Chapter 5. When Victoria first heard she was being introduced to some big boss, she didn't believe it. What kind of important person could Auntie Polly, a village woman, possibly know? She was better off finding someone on her own. Her doubts vanished the moment she arrived at the restaurant. The menu was entirely in French, and every dish was exorbitantly priced. The waiter was a foreigner, and Victoria couldn't understand a word he said. Even the other patrons were dressed formally, and Victoria felt a pang of insecurity looking down at her own dress, which had only cost a few $100s. To avoid embarrassing herself, when Sammy March asked her to order, she simply told him to decide. Watching Sammy order fluently, the admiration in her eyes was impossible to hide. Although Sammy was hardly a looker and his hair was a bit thin, she saw his designer suit and the understated luxury car he drove. Victoria felt like she had hit the jackpot. She cautiously asked if he minded that she had been married before. To her surprise, Sammy quoted classics and claimed to be a feminist who didn't care about such things at all. Under the combined influence of his words and the alcohol, Victoria started to find his ugly face handsome and charming. Without further ado, Victoria ended up in Sammy's bed that very night. The next morning, Victoria woke up feeling a little shy, worried that Sammy would think she was too forward. But one look at Sammy's pig-like face, drool trickling from his mouth, made her recoil from the memory of last night. Under the influence of alcohol, she had thought Sammy had a certain charisma. Today, looking at his face, she was genuinely startled. Small triangular eyes, a garlic bulb nose, and a face gleaming with oil. Victoria couldn't bear to look any closer and quickly tried to get dressed and leave. Sammy, waking to the movement beside him, wanted another round. God knows how long it had been since he'd been with a woman, but this little thing was now refusing him. He secretly planned to make their next meeting count, and then hurriedly drove Victoria to work. A colleague saw the luxury car dropping Victoria off and, noticing she was wearing the same clothes as yesterday, couldn't help but tease, "Lucky you, Vicky." No matter how Victoria tried to explain, they all gave her knowing looks and walked away giggling. She felt a little embarrassed, but also thought her colleagues were envious of her, so her mood wasn't bad. Remembering that the next day was Saturday, Victoria messaged Sammy to ask him out. Sammy had saved up a little money over the past 2 years of not gambling. Yesterday's dinner had been secretly charged to the company account, and the suit was borrowed. When he saw that Victoria wanted to go to the Wansheng department store, he felt a sharp pain in his wallet. That would cost a fortune, but the memory of the young girl's soft body from the night before steeled his resolve. He made a call home and tricked his family into sending him the money he'd supposedly been saving for a bride price. Watching Sammy spend even more lavishly than the day before, Victoria was completely smitten. He had spent tens of thousands on her in just one shopping trip. She thought of her pauper ex-husband. In all their time together, he had never bought her anything significant. He wouldn't even go to a department store with her. Wasn't it just because he was afraid of spending money? Thinking of him made Sammy's confident swiping of the credit card seem all the more charming, and as luck would have it, she ran into him right there. After taking over for a few days, I discovered that the subsidiary had significant problems. The department store's data looked good on paper, but its performance hadn't grown in years. I decided a field visit was necessary to identify the issues. To avoid being noticed, I went without my secretary and changed into a generic, brandless tracksuit. As I was wandering around, I ran into Victoria and Sammy. Victoria, smug look on her face, linked her arm through Sammy's and walked towards me. I was wondering why this nice mall suddenly smells of poverty. Turns out a beggar snuck in. Thinking it best to avoid trouble, I tried to walk around them and leave. Victoria glanced at my clothes, convinced that the whole Mr. Marshall thing must have been a sham. She became even more brazen. "You used to kneel and change my shoes for me all the time, didn't you? As it happens, Mr. March just bought me new shoes. How about you kneel and change them for me now?" I shoved Victoria away, and she stumbled right into Sammy's arms. She immediately put on a wronged expression and complained to Sammy, "This is that pauper ex-husband of mine." Chapter 6. Sammy March had never seen me before. He had only heard Victoria's side of the story. Seeing her pained little face, he decided to stand up for her. "Hey, buddy, that's not right. You never bought Vicky anything when you were together, but I hear you're pretty good at serving people. See my leather shoes? They're a little dirty. How about you lick them clean for me? Seeing Sammy defend her, Victoria fell for him even harder. She chimed in, "How much do you make delivering food? If you serve Mr. March well, he won't treat you poorly." I watched the two of them, chattering away like a pair of clowns. I walked towards Sammy. "Sammy March, have you really forgotten who you are?" Leaning close to his ear, I whispered, "Aren't you just a driver? And now you're pretending to be a boss." Then I slammed my shoulder hard into his. The impact sent him sprawling. Sammy, for all his bulk, was surprisingly weak and had no strength at all. He was also completely shocked that I knew his identity. He just sat there on the ground, stunned, and watched me walk away. Victoria saw me leave just like that, and was a little embarrassed by the sight of Sammy sitting on the floor. Her face instantly fell. It took Sammy buying her another handbag to cheer her up and bring a smile back to her face. The two of them, all lovey-dovey, stumbled back to a hotel. Once the lights were out, Sammy took advantage of Victoria's passion and went straight for it. This time, he was thoroughly satisfied. The next morning, he got what he wanted again. Victoria hadn't been feeling well lately, constantly exhausted. Today, she overslept again. The moment she stepped into the office, the section chief called her in. She assumed it was a reprimand for being late so often, and didn't think much of it. The section chief glared at her. "Do you have any idea how hard it was to secure the Wansheng deal? And you had to go and provoke their new CEO. What CEO? He's not." Victoria refused to believe it. She took the phone the section chief handed her and scrolled through the news page. "Sincere Marshall, new CEO of Wansheng Corporation's Crown Prince. Sincere Marshall Wansheng announces sweeping reforms. Diamond Bachelor list updated. Sincere." Marshall added. Victoria still couldn't believe it, but the man in the news photos was undeniably her ex-husband, Sincere Marshall. Ignoring the section chief shouting behind her, she turned and ran out. Victoria quickly arrived at the Wansheng Group building, but the receptionist told her she couldn't see the CEO without an appointment. She started screaming in the lobby, claiming to be Sincere Marshall's wife. The receptionist, at a loss, finally called my secretary. I instructed her to inform all security guards that Victoria was to be barred from entering any of our company's buildings from now on. It wasn't long before Victoria was dragged out of the building by security. She still refused to believe that her ex-husband, the delivery driver, was the CEO of a major corporation. What had she been scrimping and saving for all these years? She had been married to a rich man all along, but hadn't lived a single day of wealth. Her resentment toward me turned even more venomous. She was convinced that my daily food delivery runs were all a lie. The more she thought about it, the more her hatred grew, and she swore she would make me pay. But seeing my cold and final rejection, and remembering that Sammy had spent over $100,000 on her, she knew she couldn't give up on that gravy train. Weighing her options, she immediately went to find Sammy. She remembered her mother saying that Sammy worked at Haushing and was some kind of manager. Victoria took a taxi to the Haushing Group building. She told the receptionist she was looking for Mr. March. The receptionist replied that the only general manager with the surname Marshall was not named Sammy. She quickly called Sammy and told him she was right outside his company. Sammy, however, told her he was away on a business trip. A terrible feeling crept into Victoria's heart. She showed the receptionist a photo of Sammy. The receptionist's face lit up with recognition. "Oh, him, I know him. Old Sammy, the general manager's driver." A wave of fury washed over Victoria, and she fainted at the front desk. Meanwhile, Grace and I were hitting it off perfectly. To make up for all the years we had missed, I wanted to spoil her. My mother saw how in love we were and pushed the wedding plans forward at an accelerated pace. She took Grace shopping for wedding supplies every day, and they got along better than a real mother and daughter. My mother reminded me, even though Grace doesn't mind your past, our family must show our sincerity. We cannot let her feel slighted. Chapter 7. One weekend, I asked Grace to meet me at the amusement park where we had our first date. When she arrived and saw the park was completely dark, she tried to comfort me, thinking something had gone wrong. To her surprise, I took her hand and led her straight inside. The moment we stepped through the gate, all the lights in the amusement park lit up simultaneously. I led her by the hand, and then her family and friends began to appear. They were spaced out every few steps, each one handing her a rose. When her arms were so full she couldn't hold any more, I knelt on one knee, took out the custom-made diamond ring, and asked her, "We missed so many years, but from now on I will live every day as the day I love you most, making you happier with each passing day. Will you marry me?" Tears were already streaming down her face, and she could barely speak through her sobs. "I do." I slipped the ring onto her finger, stood up and pulled her into an embrace. At that moment, fireworks began to bloom in the sky. We held each other tightly in a blissful hug, neither of us wanting to be the first to let go. After a flurry of preparations, my wedding to Grace took place as scheduled. The ceremony was in progress. I looked at the pure and beautiful Grace, vowing to love her forever, my love unchanging. In that moving moment, as our guests were touched by our love, Victoria burst in. She was wearing a wedding dress that couldn't hide her pregnant belly, her makeup streaked by tears. She created a massive scene, shouting that she was carrying my child. I glanced at her stomach. It was clearly no more than 5 months along. We had been divorced for a year. I ignored her behavior, afraid Grace might misunderstand I was about to explain. But she was calm, sincere. "I trust you." I led Victoria out of the venue, trying to get her to stop, but she suddenly pulled out a pair of scissors and lunged at my stomach. One stab, then two. My body went numb. The only thing I could hear was Victoria's crazed voice. "Let's go to hell together." A month later, I opened my eyes to see Grace's worried face. "Sincere, you're finally awake," she said, tears rolling down her cheeks. I reached out and hugged her. "I will never be separated from you again." For intentional assault, Victoria was sentenced to 7 years in prison. On the day of the wedding, after seeing me collapse, she had violently stabbed herself, trying to die with me. The extreme emotional distress and massive blood loss led to a hysterectomy. She would never be able to have children. Due to her criminal record, she was fired from her job and permanently barred from public service. When she woke up from surgery, she had lost her mind, constantly asking for her husband. She would say, "I have a husband who loves me most." "Hubby, where are you?" After a psychiatric evaluation, it was determined she would spend the rest of her life in a mental institution. Sammy March was fired from the company for embezzling funds. Without a job, his hands started itching for the thrill of gambling again. He actually won a lot at first. If he had stopped then, he might have been able to live a decent life, but a gambler never quits. Inevitably, the day came when he couldn't pay his debts and his hand tendons were cut. He refused to accept his fate and tried to cheat his way to a big win, but he was caught. This time, both of his hands were cut off to settle the debt. Now he could only wander the streets as a drifter, and before long he too ended up in prison. A year later, Grace and my child was born. I named her Summer Marshall. Her name, a play on ours, signifies my constant love for Grace and the sunshine she brought back into my life. Under my management, the subsidiary's performance skyrocketed, and I returned to the head office. Holding Grace and looking at our child, I felt like the happiest man in the world. I reflect on the first half of my life. I did love Victoria, but she hurt me too deeply. I've sometimes wondered, if she hadn't asked for a divorce, would we be happy now? But there are no do-overs in life. People have to be responsible for the choices they make. I don't regret my choices, and I hope you don't regret yours either. The end.